Hi guys, in this video we'll talk about chapter 10, so something called an externality. So first, let's understand what this is, right? So externality is basically means something external. So imagine this, and then every day I will go to HEB, I will buy my own cheese. Now that's none of your problem, right? Because I pay for my own cheese. HEB sell me the cheese. So in this transaction, you have nothing to do with it. But however, imagine if I decide to eat cheese in class, and then I decide to fart in class, and now this is becoming your problem, right? So, but by the way, aren't you glad that this is not online class, not a face-to-face class? This when you are getting affected as a third party in this transaction, we call this situations externality. Okay, so something external besides the first and second party. And then in chapter 1, we said government can sometimes improve market outcome. Not always, but sometimes. And these situations when government can improve market outcome is whenever you have externality. So externality is the uncompensated impact of one person's action on the well-being of a bystander, which means when I fart and I don't pay you for it, and then you have this uncompensated impact. So that's an externality. And then this is also called market failure. It's anytime when the market fail to achieve a socially desired outcome. Okay, and then we're gonna have two type of externality. The first one is called negative, and the other one is called positive. So negative means it's something bad. So pollution, a fart, that'd be a negative externality. A positive externality, it'd be something that's beneficial. So suppose, what's a good positive externality? Suppose every day I like to listen to music. So I go to iTunes, I buy the music. Let's suppose I buy, who is popular now? I buy Nora Jones, and then you guys just happen to like Nora Jones too. So when I play Nora Jones music in class, you guys like it too, but you didn't pay for it, but you're getting this extra benefit. That will be a positive externality. Okay. By the way, Nora Jones for all the old people, so you guys don't like it. Okay. All right. So some example for negative externality. So exhaust from automobile, that's a pollution. A barking dogs, that's also pollution. That's noise pollution. And then positive externalities is anytime if you will have restored historical buildings, so acting as like a museum, that's good for everybody. When you have research into new technologies, that's also benefiting everybody. All right, so let's look at our market equilibriums. Okay, so go back. Now, let's say this is the market for aluminum. And then for aluminum, now when you produce aluminum, there is a private value. That's how much the consumers want to buy this aluminum. That's your market value. And then there's also a private cost. Now, this private cost are the companies who are making this aluminum. That's the private cost. So between your private consumers and your private sellers, then together, then we have this equilibrium. And then this is the market is at. When you go back. I need to be able to draw lines on here. Where was I? Here. All right. So between your private sellers, private buyers, I'm going to decide that here is our equilibrium price, and then here is our market outcome. Okay. Now, however, when you're producing aluminum, there is a cost to society because there's a pollution involved, and then the pollution is not if it's not being compensated, that there's an extra cost to all the societies. Now, imagine this. Imagine that if you living next door to the aluminum plant, and then every day they have pollutions, but they don't compensate you for it, and that be a negative externality. So which means that the cost to you, the extra cost your burden of this pollution should be also calculated into this production cost. So we're going to have this thing called social cost. So social cost, we're going to take the private cost, so how much it costs the plant to produce each tons of aluminum, plus the cost to bystanders who is being negatively impacted by this pollution. So how much it costs to you in terms of pollution should be also calculated into the total cost of producing this aluminum, not just the social cost, not just the private cost of the companies. Let's put this into dollar term, okay? So let's suppose when they're producing aluminum, it's very noisy, okay? And let's say that when the company produce 1 ton of aluminum, it will cost them, let's say $100. At the same time, you who's living next door, you have to buy earpiece to cancel out all the noises. And let's suppose this earpiece will cost you $10. So the cost of pollution to you is $10. The cost of producing to the companies is $100. Then your social cost will be altogether. So the 100 plus 10, so social cost should be 110. Okay, so social cost is always more than the private cost because there's still this negative externality that's being impacted by the bystanders. And then when you draw the social cost curve, because your social cost is more than private cost always, your social cost curve is also always above your regular supply curve. So we're going to have 2 supply curve here. We're going to have your regular supply curve, that's your private cost, and then we'll have the social cost supply curve that's accounted for all the costs involved. And then which means that this is how much the market will produce if left by itself. And this is how much we want the market to produce. So again, if you're living next door to the aluminum plant, then you might not want the company to produce a lot of aluminums because the more aluminum they produce, the more pollution they have. So as a society, we might want to desire less amount of aluminum compared to the company and the buyers want to produce. So when you have a negative externality, your social cost is higher, and then your social optimum output is always less than your market outcome. Make sense? So which means as a society, we want them to produce less than before. Now, in this case, government can step in and help us to correct this market failure. And then this strategy is called internalizing the externality. Okay, so something that's external going to make it internal. And there are a couple ways government can do this. We're going to talk about this later in the chapter. Okay, so now next, let's look at the positive externality. So positive externality is anytime you have this benefit to everybody else, but it's not being compensated for. Okay, so one good example is education. Now, guys, imagine this. Imagine that I'm a very old person. I live in a neighborhood. I don't like kids, so I have no children. But my neighbors have children, and then they're very noisy. Now, when the neighbors' children go to school, which means they're not in the neighborhood anymore, the neighborhood become quieter, and I'm better off. So which means for me as a grumpy old guy, I have an incentive for the kids to go to school. So which means that I should be partially responsible, or actually partially paying for the kids' education. So when they go to school, I have this quietness. Okay, so let's look at how this works. What's different between here and before? When you have a negative externality, you're gonna have a social cost. But when you have a positive externality, you're gonna have this social value. So social value, think this as the demand for the entire society. Now, so the one below is your demand for individual consumers, and then the one above is your demand for the entire society. So in the example for education, imagine this: if left education to the kids' parents or the kids' family, that's how much education the kids' family want to consume, and then as an entire society, again, I want to have my neighbor's kids go to school, so we want to have more education. Then your social value is more than your private value. That means as an entire society, then we want more education for the children. So that's why your demand is higher than before. And then you can also have this difference here. So the market outcome, if left by itself, is less than the optimal outcome. So as an entire society, our socially desired output is more than the privately produced output. So that's why to internalizing this externality, our government should do something to help our students to go to school. And then guys, really, right now when you're attending classes at school, big part of your tuition is getting paid by the state government. So which means in this way, our state government is helping you to go to school, which means this will increase our demand for education. Okay, so you go to your socially desired output. All right, now, so to help the market to internalizing the externality, so to fix this market failure, what negative externality does, government should tax the activity, so make it more expensive. And then for the positive externality, government should subsidize the activity, which means make it cheaper, so more consumer will buy it or consume it. And then subsidy just means a negative tax. So instead of taking money away from you, you're getting more money for it. That's called subsidy. So your education is being subsidized by our state government. Okay, those are all subsidies. This is not important. All right, so know the difference between command and control policy and market-based policies. So command and control policy is a very strict regulation. It's basically setting a hard limit of how much our pollutions are, or how much our educations are. Now, the market-based policy, it means for the government to prevent incentive, mostly monetary incentive, to persuade individual parties to act in a way that's according to our socially desired output. So, which means higher taxes or more subsidies given to parents for the kids to go to school. Those are market-based policies. Now, if it's command control policy, it'll be like, imagine the government telling each parent says, "Hey, parents, your kids have to go to school. If you don't go to school, then you're breaking the law." Now, that will be the command control policy. But in the market-based policy, let's suppose the government says, "Hey, parents, if your kids go to school, every year I'll give you $100 more." So that will be a market-based policy. Okay, so providing more incentives. Okay, we don't have to talk about this. Just know what's the EPA. So EPA stands for Environmental Protection Agency. Ever since the President Trump is office, EPA is becoming less and less important. Okay, and then guys, if you're interested, go take a look, see who is the current head of EPA. See what it did before. So right now, this guy's name is Scott Pruitt. He was the Attorney General for Oklahoma, and when he was Attorney General for Oklahoma a couple years ago, he sued EPA many times. So go research. It's pretty interesting. All right, we can skip this. We already talked about it. What else can we talk about? The carbon tax. Okay, so the tradable pollution permit. This is pretty popular in Europe. We don't have them over here. So it's something called a carbon permit. So in many countries in Europe, government will issue this pollution permit to each individual company. So based on what they produce, based on how much their market share is, or how big the company is, every year the government will be issuing permit to those companies. And then when the company have the permit, they can either use the permit by producing whatever they're producing, or they can don't produce it or reduce pollution and then sell the permit to somebody else. So when the government have this policy or this program, it gives more companies more incentive to reduce pollution on their own, which means that if they produce less, and then they can make more money by selling their excess pollution permit. Okay, so it's been working pretty good in European countries, but we don't have them over here. Let me see anything else we need to talk about. Now what's a code theorem? It just says that if private parties can bargain without cost over the allocation of resource, then they can solve the problem by themselves. So another word to put it, that if the private party can solve the problem by themselves efficiently, then we don't need the government to be involved. So in this case, of all the externality that between your third parties and then those two parties, if they can work together and then get a solution out, then we don't need a government control. Okay, and then there are different ways to do it. The most important issue we need to have, it's here, is the rights. Is who owns the right. Okay. All right. We can skip this. Not important. It's not on the test. I think. Oh, that's it. Okay, so guys, that's it for chapter 10. So have any question, let me know. And then next, I'm gonna do chapter 11. All right, guys. See you later. Bye bye.